just Susan, real quick, I'll tell you, even though now we're live on YouTube, our kids are great. Everybody's working. Well, three of us are working from this home. So my husband and I, and our daughter is here. She normally lives and works in Philadelphia, but she's here. She's been here pretty much since March. And our son is in Chicago, enjoying the balmy weather in school and doing kind of what Davidson is doing, although he has to be a little more hands-on. He's studying film. So there's a class, at least one class, that he has to be tested for weekly so he can go and be in person. But we're all, knock on wood, we're all doing well.
Good. Where's he in school, Ann? What college?
He's at Columbia College in Chicago.
Oh, good.
So it's kind of fun to think about these films with him in mind. And
Yeah.
he's watching, they're really taking him through the drill. So he texted the other night that he's watched Singing in the Rain. Just adorable 19-year-old boy watching Singing in the Rain. And there was another one that I was kind of surprised he hadn't seen, but I'm a little envious that he has an excuse to watch all these great movies. But
our grandson is up at University of Vermont doing the same thing. And his father said the only problem with watching a film with him is sometimes I'd like to sit in to enjoy it instead of watching for little things that have significance.
Well, have I got the Sunday school class for you? So I'm going to equip you with a little bit of film knowledge that you can drop on him the next time y'all are watching a film together. Give him a lesson. And I see you. Hey, welcome, Barbara Bentley. I see you're on here. Bob, I see you.
Here.
Are you sporting a new facial accoutrement?
Well, it's my way to deal with all the shutdown and lockdown of the pandemic. And when it was all over, I'm going to shave it off.
All right. I like it. I wish my pandemic hair looked as nice as your mustache. It's just not going well, but I don't see anybody, so why bother? All right, well.
It's just right before 9:45, so let me start and say welcome, and we're delighted to have you for this series of weeks. We're looking forward to it. And I'd like to introduce Ann by saying she is chair and professor of religious studies at Davidson College. She's also a graduate of Davidson College, has a master's degree from Yale, a master's in divinity, and a PhD from Duke. She teaches courses in American religion and culture, specializing in 19th century women's religious activism. Her research interests include experiences of clergy spouses, American civic myths, popular religious practices, and religious memoir, as well as African-American religious traditions and Mormonism. She teaches regularly in the college's first year's humanities program, and she's currently writing a biography of Ruth Bell Graham. She also co-edited a volume of Billy Graham titled Billy Graham, American Pilgrim, which was published by Oxford University Press in 2017. She's married to Trey and has two children, Maisie and Will. And we're so looking forward to our time together. Thank you, Ann.
Thanks, Glennette. And I'll just take this opportunity to show you our book, which has been out a couple of years now. But if you have an interest in Billy Graham as a cultural figure, I can't recommend this highly enough. It's Billy Graham, American Pilgrim. You think I'd know the title of my own book. And we had a lot of fun working on it. And, you know, we've had pretty good response. So I just recommend it to you if you're in that vein. Thank you, Lynette. That was fun to hear all the things that I think I know, used to know something about maybe. All right, folks. Well, I hope you can all see the screen. And so great to see everybody. I know you all know each other and you see each other in this context every week, or at least on a regular basis, but I feel the need to stir the pot a little bit. So this is just my introductory slide now. Let me move on. So here's our plan for the day. I have found that living and working in Zoom, I have a tendency to lose track of things. So it's always good for me to have a plan. And it's great. We've already reached our second agenda item. So we've had our gathering time. So we're going to tackle an important issue in just a moment. I want us to read and think together about Psalm 139, which is the basis for the film that we're going to watch today, which is titled Knowing Peanuts. And I'll let you just imagine what those peanuts are. What realm of reality are we in? And then we'll finish up, I hope, with some discussion and maybe some film criticism to help you all out who have children who are studying film. All right, well, I'm going to challenge you all, maybe if you've never done this before, to you can switch away from this screen or open up another window. And if you don't feel like doing that, then don't worry, we can process verbally. But I wanted to try this tool that Dr. Multaup taught me. That is, if you'll go to this webpage, menti.com, it should give you a code, or it'll give you a place to put this code in, and that will allow you to take a little survey on a controversial question of the day. And hey, Lacey.
Hey, good morning. Trying to get there.
We'll see how this works. Oh, look at you all. You all are speedy. And you all can see this, how this is shaking out, but I'll share it in a second. Let's see.
Ann, could you repeat the entry for the access to the other window?
Yes, sir. And you may be able to see it now, Charlie. 59. Oh,
Yeah, I see it. Thanks.
you got it?
Got it.
You got it? Okay. All right. Let's see. Has everybody expressed their opinion?
Repeat the URL, please.
It's menti.com, MENTI.com. As in so many things these days, we are a deeply divided Covenant class. I am in the group that I just care about snacks and television ads. We'll see what happens. Oh, we are really deeply divided. All right. All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Anybody want to explain their? I want to hear about snacks. Somebody tell us what your dreaming about eating or making, or your favorite?
We ordered snacks from the Pines and it never came.
What?
Oatmeal cookies.
Ooh,
And
yeah,
barbecue pork sandwiches with coleslaw.
yum,
Ooh,
delicious.
yeah. Tex-Mex dip.
Ooh, what do you dip into it?
Well, it's a layer of beans on the bottom, and then
Fritos.
all kinds of tomatoes and avocado and just all kinds of everything you can think, onions, everything you can think to layer, and then you use chips to dig into it.
We'll be right down, Evelyn.
Pardon?
I know.
It isn't ready yet.
It's not ready yet.
About halftime.
If I make too much, maybe I'll send some up to the Cliftons and
Oh, wow.
We'd be glad to have it too. Don't.
Oh, absolutely.
Kirkendalls. You want
Yep.
some?
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Do you do carry out?
Is that game on today?
I should have put that. I should have added that as a category.
Where's your rock?
I should have put that in as a category. All right. Well, I am gonna let that go and come back to my other screen, and we will move ahead. You might want to keep that link open because I'm gonna vex you with that one again later. So now I want to move from the ridiculous to the sublime. Actually, let's reverse the typical order. And what I would like to do is spend 10-15 minutes reading different versions of these sections of the psalm. So you may have a Bible. I see people scurrying for their Bibles, which is never a bad idea. But I happen to have a couple of versions, several versions here. What I would love to have is a volunteer or some volunteers, if you happen to have a colleague there with you, to
139.
read aloud. And those of us who are not reading, feel free to turn off your video, feel free to close your eyes, try to just listen to the text. Try to not come to this with any expectations, but let it try to act like you've never heard this before. So do we have a volunteer to read this? Yes, Ginger. Thank you.
O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my uniform substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you.
Thank you so much. I have a feeling you've done that before.
No, well, I read in front of people, but
You have a great reading voice. Thank you
Thank you.
so much. Any phrases, words that rise to the surface for you?
Hidden and secret.
Verse 2.
Jane, you're muted, but I see your lips moving. All right. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
okay, now.
ahead, Pam.
I like the last line, I come to the end, I am still with you.
I'm struck by verse 4, even before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely.
Yeah.
I'm struck by
What I was trying to say before at verse 16, you planned how many days I would live. You wrote down the number of them in your book before I had lived through even one of them.
Right.
So our fate has been determined before we're even born.
I mean, you've already glossed that for us, that there is one way of reading that, nothing happens without God knowing. Nothing happens to me without God already having known it, cast it. Yeah.
I was struck by verse 14. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. We have a granddaughter struggling with depression. I wish she could believe that.
Yeah. Side note, Ginger, did you happen to, it's not a program that I listen to frequently, but On Being this morning on NPR?
No.
Might be worth you listening to. It maybe something that that she would. Well, I don't know if I can chat. Somehow I don't have the controls, but it's On Being, ONING.
Okay, thank you. We'll find that.
But the topic was depression and people who produce their work as a result, as a process of engaging their depression. I caught the very tail end of it, but I want to go back and listen to it. All right.
I have
one more. Yeah.
I have a copy of The Messenger, and it starts a little different.
Oh, hold on, Evelyn. Oh, you're reading my mind. But first, something completely different.
She's gonna show that.
I have been reading for fun. I've been reading Calvin's commentaries on the Psalms. And yeah, I know I do need to get out more, but I can't. So as I was reading Psalm 139, I thought, I wonder what the Geneva Bible says. And John Kirkendall sitting here, I have to say, I know that Calvin, I think, did not translate the Geneva Bible, but it was the Bible that John Knox used, I think. I don't know. He'll school me on that later. But if we have any bold souls out there who feel like reading a little bit more complicated syntax, anybody want to give this one a reading for us? And again, as if we've not heard it before, even though we just heard a version of this 5 minutes ago. You might close your eyes, you might mute your screen. Any volunteers to read this one? Not all at once, people. Come on.
And
Only
I'll
one
give it a
person.
shot.
Okay, she's good.
Great. Thank you, Susan.
O Lord, thou hast tried me and known me. Thou knowest my sitting and my rising. Thou understandest my thought afar off. Thou compassest my paths and my lying down, and art accustomed to all my ways. For there is not a word in my tongue, thou knowest it wholly, O Lord. But lo, thou knowest it wholly, O Lord. Thou holdest me straight behind and before, and layest thine hand upon me. Thy knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain unto it. For thou hast possessed my reins. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wondrously made. Marvelous are thy works, and my soul knoweth it well. My bones are not hid from thee, though I was made in a secret place and fashioned beneath in the earth. Thine eyes did see me when I was without form, for in thy book were all things written, which in continuance were fashioned when there was none of them before. How dear, therefore, are thy thoughts unto me, O God! How great is the sum of them! If I should count them, they are more than the sand. When I awake, I am still with thee. Sorry, struggling over the of the.
That was lovely. Thank you. That was lovely. Phrases, words that catch your attention in this version, or maybe reinforce what you heard in the other version.
I like verse 18.
I'll push it back, Glenette, to 17. How dear, therefore, are thy thoughts unto me, O God, how great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more than the sand. When I awake, I am still with thee. God's thoughts. Other words or phrases. Yeah.
And I think we said this already, but I do love the verse. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wondrously made.
Yeah.
Just beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's Missy. I'm not, I was overwhelmed. This is not a word. I was overwhelmed with the intimacy of this. I think when I closed my eyes and listened to it, that was what just overwhelmed me.
Which is not, Missy, maybe a word that, I don't know, it's kind of a surprising word. This psalm, so many things are about the grandeur, but then your word sends me back and it's about, bones and being knit together in my mother's womb.
And with you before you were even born, and
yeah,
right on through.
Yep. Yeah.
And
yes.
Bill Cockrell,
hey.
I noticed in this translation, verse 5, thou holdest me straight behind and before. That's a little more positive statement than you hem me in. I just, that it clarifies it, I think, better than the NRSV does.
Uh-huh. Very interesting. It's fun too to see some of the consistencies from one translation, this translation, to the next, separated by 400 years. or so. All right, Evelyn, you are on.
Oh, okay.
You have already volunteered yourself. I'm assuming this is what you're talking about, the message.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you read this one. And
Okay.
again, folks, if you, let go the past 10 minutes and hear this as if you've not heard it before, mute your screen if you want to, close your eyes, and just listen for the words.
God, investigate my life. Get all the facts firsthand. I'm an open book to you. Even from the distance, you know what I am thinking. You think, you know when I leave and when I get back. I'm never out of your sight. You know everything I'm going to say. Before I start the first sentence, I look behind me and you're there. Then up ahead and you're there too. Your reassurance presence coming and going. This is too much, too wonderful. I can't take it all in. Oh, is there anything I can go to avoid your spirit, to be out of your sight? If I climb to the sky, you're there. If I go underground, you're there. If I fly on morning swings to the far western horizon, you'd find me in the minute. You're already there waiting. Then I say to myself, oh, even seeing me in the dark. At night, I'm immersed in the light. It's a fact. Darkness isn't dark to you. Night and day, darkness and light, they're all the same to you. Is there more?
Let's start with 13.
Okay. Oh, yes. You shaped me first inside, then out. You formed me in my mother's womb. I thank you. High God, you're breathtaking. Body and soul, I am marvelously made. I worship in adoration. What a creation. You know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I am made, bit by bit, how I was sculptured from nothing into something. Like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth. All of the stages of my life were spread before you. The day of my life all prepared before I even lived one day.
Thank you. Thanks. Words, phrases that catch your attention. This is a little different. As Evelyn said, really starts differently.
I love the message because it puts it in common language that we all can understand easily.
It includes a significant amount of what I would call modern understanding and thinking about the natural character of the world.
Can you give an example?
This one has got our formation from conception to birth. And instead of being made in the darks of the earth or whatever, let's see, depths of the earth.
Yeah. Other thoughts about this one? How this maybe following on these comments elucidates your, or even complicates your reading of the previous two versions.
Oh, it's Eugene Peterson.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did
you? I love the message.
Eugene Peterson. This is his translation interpretation.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I love the message, but this to me is not one of the passages that it improves upon.
Oh, say more. Say more,
Well,
Jesse.
Formed me in my mother's womb. That's not quite as good as knit me together. Knit me together in my mother's womb. It is a magnificent psalm, and I think that putting it into more modern language, it loses something to me.
Mm-hmm.
Loses the poetry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I see some nodding. I see lots of nodding, actually. All right. Sorry, Eugene.
I'm
Wherever
gonna-
you may be. Yeah.
I'm going to take the other side. I mean, we're all of the same age group, but if you are a younger person trying to read and assimilate the Bible, it's easier for them to understand and comprehend.
Interesting.
I have the way that my mother gave me when I went off to college, because she felt that I would understand it perhaps. And that's it again, I think is easier for a younger person to understand. I'm putting today myself in that category.
Anything can happen in Zoom.
Totally. Yes.
Do you have it right there with you?
I do.
Can you hold it up so we can see the cover? Yes. I remember that from
about 60, 64, 68.
Actually, we had it at the bookstore.
My mother gave me a copy too. But we had it at our bookstore.
Very, very mid-century, groovy. Yes. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, you all are brilliant. That is no surprise. So we're gonna keep moving. Brilliant and savvy about different translations, different versions. And so now we're gonna move to the main feature, as it were. I'll stick with cinematic language since we're doing this, and I'm hoping that this is going to work. I need to go back into my, back into my sharing and share sound, I think, so that you all don't have to read lips. And I'm not sure. Anyway, I won't set this up. I'll just turn that off, and we'll see what happens.
I don't know if we really appreciate how big George Washington Carver was in his day. This was a person who was revered around the world. Time magazine called him the Black Leonardo. Henry Ford would call him one of America's greatest scientists. All of these things are made that much more important and powerful given Carver's upbringing. Born in slavery, abducted as a toddler, then orphaned, raised by the folks who'd owned his parents. George Washington Carver had a quest for knowledge. Years later, he would write, "My very soul thirsted for an education." Even at a young age, he decided he loved plants and flowers. By the time he was no more than 10 or 12 years of age, all of the local folks would call him the plant doctor. Dr. Carver would wake up every morning and go on a nature walk. He always said, God is going to reveal to us things if we put our hands in His. He was on one of his nature walks, and he said, "Dear Mr. Creator, will you please tell me why the universe was made?" And the great Creator replied, "Little man, you're asking too much for that small mind of yours. Ask for something more your own size." He continued on his walk, and he said, "Will you please tell me why man was made?" Again, the great Creator replied, "Little man, you're still asking for much too much." Dr. Carver continued on his walk, and he was thinking, I'll ask about something small, something insignificant like me. Will you please tell me why the peanut was made? And the great creator replied, even the peanut is infinite, but we shall get started. In 1891, George went to Ames, Iowa to attend the Iowa Agricultural College. And he was there until he got the call from Booker T. Washington to come teach at his Tuskegee Institute. Carver's main intent in working at Tuskegee was to improve the health and living conditions of the Southern farmer. Cotton, which many of the farmers had been planting for many years, was taking nitrogen from the soil. He started working with the peanut because he knew that it could put nitrogen back in the soil, and he also knew that it could be useful. That's why he came up with over 300 uses for the peanut. Dr. Carver turned to the peanut as a way to address poverty, poor nutrition, and prejudice, and it worked. He was able to use the peanut to bring people together. Dr. George Washington Carver lived a life of modesty, of humility, and of great creativity. He always gave credit to God because he understood there was only so much that he could understand. That's why he spoke to God every day, trying to understand more about the world, trying to understand what he should be doing. And I think therein lies an example for all of us.
I heard a couple of Okay, let's see. I'm gonna switcheroo-ny a little bit again. And I have another Menti question for you. So if you have, let's see, nope. Sorry, y'all, I'm having a little, just a little pause. There we go. Okay, I'm going to share again. And you can go to the same Menti. If you close that, you can go back to that same spot. And now we're going to make a word cloud. So you'll see, I hope when you get there, a screen where you can just, great. No flies on y'all. You are so good. Any word. And you can, if there's a word that you see that you want to add to, you can retype it. Neat. Neat. Isn't that interesting? Anybody else? Fun. Isn't this fun?
And you must have learned about a lot of new apps while you've been doing Zoom presentations.
Isn't this neat? I think I said this before y'all joined, Cecil, but I'm teaching with Christy Multop in the psychology department, and she knows all this stuff. So I just learned this week from her, and I think it's fun. I'm a visual person, so this is very helpful for me to see this. Okay, so let's just go. Let's think about this, Minty, for a second. Perseverance, what a great word. And I'm interested in how peanuts got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And maybe I am an outlier, but the main thing that I knew about George Washington Carver before I watched this film was peanuts, 300 uses for the peanut. But that's not what we get from this film. We get this whole dimension of his work and his humility, his faith. Anybody want to reflect on this word cloud?
Hey, Anne, can you share the word cloud? I'm not sure we can see it on our side.
Sorry, that would make this question a little easier to answer. Thanks, Megan.
Uh-huh.
There we go. How's that?
Okay.
I'm going to reflect on the...
Curiosity led to, experimentation and his ingenuity and
But it was grounded in a real practical goal, which was to make things better for small farmers.
Yeah.
Because the peanuts would restore the soil, which had been leached out by the cotton, many generations of cotton plantings.
Yeah.
And going back to the psalm that we read,
yeah,
it's just amazing to think that God knew every one of these words before any of us wrote them down.
Cecil, I was thinking in the same light that what struck me was his trust, that he knew that God was with him and asked the bigger question. So God, how did the world get made, or how did mankind get made? Well, how did I get made? So it was from the very beginning a trust that God was present in our lives and in his lives. And I thought that was amazing for a young man.
Mm-hmm. Especially, we get a little bit from the scholar practitioner here is Paxton Williams, and I had to track him down. I was curious about his background. He is an assistant attorney general in Iowa, but he's also an expert in George Washington Carver, and he has a one-man show about George Washington Carver. So that's a little about him, but some of you may know George Washington Carver's story. Born in slavery, as a toddler, he was stolen with his mother and one of his sisters. Their owner bought him back and basically raised him. Those were the Carvers, white folks, and this is all happening in Missouri and Kansas. And then he is kind of fostered around different families in the area. It's only when he goes to Tuskegee and, connects with Booker T. Washington that he becomes George Washington Carver. He took Booker T. Washington's name as an homage to him, which I never knew. I just assumed it was George Washington that he was named for. He's the first African-American to earn a Bachelor of Science degree. So, all of this, to follow up on circle back to Pam's comment, all of this is the path, this crazy path that he walked to this life of discovery and curiosity, and faith and exploration. All right, we're going to come back to this topic, but I promised you a little film school, so now I'm going to try to deliver on that and share this screen. There's a lot to talk about in this short film. Scott does an amazing job of just cramming into his short movies so much skill and technique that you don't notice it until you start to try to pay attention to it. So this is just one aspect of the film that I think is worth thinking about, and how it reinforces and helps produce the message of the film. Let's see, actually, I think I'm going to go, sorry, I'm a little undecided about what to share, because I'm trying to keep it G-rated for Sunday school. All right, we're just going to watch a little bit of this. Can you see this screen? Can you see the YouTube screen, or are you seeing the?
We're seeing YouTube.
Okay, good. Perfect.
When we look, for example, from a plane looking down at cars or buildings or something like that, how do they look? They look very pathetic, very weak, very small, very tiny. And that's no different when we are above someone or something. When we look down at a little child, the child is obviously small. Yes, but guess what that also means? Small means weak, pathetic, puny, unable to take care of itself, insignificant, of low status. Now, this is not a meaning that has to be 100% true all the time. And so most of the time when you see a movie or video or TV show use a high camera angle, it's basically saying of its subject matter, in this particular moment, either the character in the frame or you as the viewer, or both, are supposed to think of that person as weak, as pathetic, as feeling weak, as feeling pathetic. And so high camera angles give you some of the psychology of characters, or even the way you ought to feel as a viewer about the objects in the frame. Here's an example of how I've been manipulated by high camera angles. There's a humane society near us, and I've thought about adopting a dog. Every time I go to this humane society's website, they have pictures of all the dogs, and I want a smaller dog, something 30 pounds or under. When I look at these pictures of all of these dogs, they all seem small to me. So then I click on the links for each one of them. It turns out that almost all of these dogs are huge. They're way over 50 pounds. They're enormous dogs that don't fit into my house. I get annoyed by this. Now, why do I click on the links though? It's because each one of these shots of these dogs is a high camera angle shot, making the dogs look small, thus distorting my perspective of what these dogs are. This is the way that photographs in any medium, on the internet, in newspapers and so on, manipulate their subject matters. In fact, every photograph ever taken is biased. If anybody says otherwise, don't believe them, because the bias is in the angle. This is a pretty easy thing to notice, but in fact, after teaching college students, they've seen these high camera angles thousands of times, but never paused to think once about what they actually mean. When I tell them about this, they start to notice instantly all the high camera angle shots in the movies that they watch or the TV shows. And I bet that's what will happen to you. So go take this advice and run with it. When you see a camera above a character, why is the filmmaker inserting this? Now, there are two cautions. One caution is that I'm only describing what's happened in film so far. That is, for all of films for the last 120 years, high camera angles have tended to mean that the subject matter has been diminished or made puny. That does not mean that that's what high camera angles will now signify until the rest of time or in other places in the world besides Hollywood. In fact, filmmakers might change the grammatical meaning of high camera angles at some point. The second caution is my 70% rule. 70% of the time, high camera angles mean what I said they mean, but you've got filmmakers who know the grammar and then mess with it or subvert it or use high camera angles in different ways. There's a great example in The Shawshank
we'll watch
Redemption, where Andy Dufresne, the main character, gets out of prison, he frees himself, and he's standing outside in the lightning and thunder and rain, rejoicing. That's a high camera angle, but it doesn't mean that he's puny or weak or pathetic.
Okay. Let's go. We'll come back to so with that very quick introduction to high camera angles, again, just one of the things that one could consider in terms of the art of the film. Let's just talk as we finish up. We have a few minutes left. How that film technique of the high angle or the bird's eye view angle that Scott uses in some shots of the film when he is showing George Washington Carver in nature, how that might help create what he wants us to take away from George Washington Carver's story. Any thoughts on that?
I initially thought that was God's perspective of him.
And so how does that, say more about that?
Just that George Washington Carver is being viewed, manipulated, known, experienced, et cetera, from God's perspective. And that has a huge impact on what happens.
Okay, good, thank you. Other thoughts? And I've just flipped us back to the Nrsv of Psalm 139.
Well, God is in behind him and before him, above him. He knows him.
Yeah. And so what does that mean for George Washington Carver? How do we make that work in his story?
Yeah, I think, from that high view, he looked like he is very insignificant, but he really is significant when you look at his actions and what he does with his life. Even though he's a small part of the world, he can have an impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Thank you, Lynn. Other thoughts?
And he's a man of faith and he trusts God, and therefore God can use him in powerful ways. Mm-hmm. Because he's devoted his life, and he goes back. Charlie put in the chat about nature and nature's impact on the creative forces in our lives, and clearly I think George Washington Carver draws on that. Said he went for a walk every day in nature, and so that was, I think, part of his inspiration.
Yeah.
God kept saying to him in response to his questions, "Little man," and the camera angle certainly made him appear to be a little man as he walked along for his morning walk. The trees, the bushes, the sky, everything was over him. So he was, in effect, a little man.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too, just jumping in here for a second, you see him as very small and being this very significant man. And then you think about God's answer of even the small thing like the peanut being infinite.
Yeah.
And it's that interesting tie or juxtaposition there.
Yes. Yeah, so that the narration leads me, I'm kind of following the pattern of the conversation. Little, oh great creator, why was the earth created? Why were humans created? Why was the peanut? And I'm thinking, okay, peanut we can handle. Peanut is manageable. And God counters with, well, the peanut is pretty complicated. As Megan, as you say, the peanut is a really complicated thing, but let's get started. Let's begin where we can begin. You and I, George Washington Carver, can meet on the peanut and work from there. It's a lovely structure, verbally and also visually, the way that Scott gives it to us. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that the high camera angle showing him walking as a little person was God directing his path as to what he wants him to follow.
That made me think, I hadn't thought about it until you all lifted up those phrases this morning, the you hem me in, behind and before, and the way that it was phrased in the Geneva Bible, thou holdest me straight behind and before and layest thine hand upon me. And Scott is showing him on this path. Maybe he walked the same way every day, but he took these regular walks. And so he probably had some usual places that he wandered around in, but just the visual of that path really struck me the last time that we watched it, or the time that we watched it.
God took two unknowns and made them into important.
Oh, we lost you, Jane.
Can you hear me now?
You're very faint.
My husband never uses those words. He took two insignificant things, a human being, small, and a peanut, and made them wonderful, miraculous in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. Say more, Charlie.
Well, we haven't mentioned the word race or slavery or Southern heritage.
Why should that come into it? He was his own person, regardless of his color or his circumstances. He had a will and a drive to make himself better.
There's a little bit of method in my madness choosing this film. Scott had sent me an email several months ago letting me know what you all had watched with him when he came to the Covenant class, because I didn't want to rerun, especially try to rerun Scott after he had discussed films with you all. We are in Black History Month. So I didn't want to, put that out there at first, because Black History Month is controversial, not just to some white people, but to Black people who have contributed, as we see, constitutively to the world that we live in. But I did want to feature a story that maybe we are less familiar with from a marginalized population. And yes, he was born into slavery. He was not his own person, really, until in the way that majority cultures understand being our own people, having ownership over ourselves, our bodies, and our work. Until he was studying, until he was in college, and then was able to create a path or follow his path. But I think, Charlie, I'll affirm your mention of the slogan, and as a historian, affirm that it's important that we know the history in all its complications of our country and our inventors and our peanuts.
One of the things that struck me early in the film was that Henry Ford was an admirer of Carver's. But yet you look, I mean, Ford, as we know, and I'm putting it delicately, was a conflicted individual where the path turned. To use Robert Frost's The Road Less Traveled, one of them took it and the other one did not. And it strikes me that while Ford admired Carver, he certainly did not follow the same path.
Yeah.
There's a gloss on that, though. Henry Ford put millions of dollars into Tuskegee.
Well, maybe we're going, we're taking a little jog around, which is fine, but we also have to think about Tuskegee and Booker T. Washington compared to people like W.B. Du Bois and the talented 10th idea, so that, Tuskegee was aiming at, I think Mary Thornberry said before, kind of the common farmer and the Southern Compromise, so-called, that Booker T. Washington made to accept and educate the common Negro, and I'm using that as the proper term in that era, as opposed to W.B. Du Bois, who wanted to lift up the most talented of the Black community and eventually, lift everybody up behind him, behind them. So there's not unanimity in the Black community at this moment in history, just like there's not unanimity in the Black community now about the best ways to address white supremacy and racial inequity and the problems that face us right now. But I think the first thing is we have to know a lot more about this history as white folks, so that we can speak with empathy about or feel what is maybe our brothers and sisters are feeling and experiencing.
So can I ask John a question? So did Henry Ford give money to Tuskegee because he was an admirer of George Washington Carver and the work that he was doing there?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that he had as Ann was talking about, the two, W.E.B. Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington's idea of, he said it, he told a story in one of his famous speeches, put down your bucket where you are. In other words, take what you got and live with it and bring it up. And it's kind of analogous to what Carver was doing with Peanut. But I think maybe a part of what Ford was up to, and I don't know his story, except for the generalities as Eric was mentioning, but I think probably he liked that idea of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, working hard, probably providing a labor force for him too, in Detroit. But he saw this kind of grassroots education as something which was not a threat in the way that perhaps Du Bois and the other group might have been. That's a generalization.
Henry Ford also funded Berry College in North Georgia, which was started by Martha Berry to educate rural farm people. It was a work-study program.
Yeah. And thank you, John, and thank you, Allison, for adding to the texture of our knowledge here. And my intention is not to either take away from George Washington Carver or lift up one vision over another. I think what we need to do is just begin or continue talking about these figures and the networks that they operated in. And it's important to know, of course, coming back to the film, that George Washington Carver was a man of faith. And that faith does not take us away from the issues of the day, but faith, as it did for George Washington Carver, takes us right into the issues of, for him, poverty and sustenance. Somebody put sustenance into our word cloud, which I love, and work. So I just love this film, and I invite you, if you can find it, to watch it again, to think about it, maybe to investigate more about George Washington Carver. Yeah, Allison.
You mentioned Paxton Williams. So I Googled him. He has written a play about George Washington Carver, and it's called Listening to the Still Small Voice. And he's portrayed Washington Carver in that play over 400 times, it says. So I'm going to try to find that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be fun. I wonder if he's doing any Zoom performances that we could tune into, if y'all aren't tired of living on Zoom. We should stop. I hate to stop. The clock is a tyrant, but it's been delightful. And I look forward to seeing y'all next week. Same Zoom time, same Zoom channel. Thank you, Megan, for saving me from my technological self.
Thank you, Ann.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Be well and
Thank
stay
you.
safe.
Thanks,
Wear
Ann.
Thanks, Ann.
Great class.
Get
Bye,
the
guys.
vaccines.
Thanks, Ann.
Giving us a
You're
lot